Hello and welcome to another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop. Countach could be the heading of this video. Harry, as nearly 200,000 people have seen since his video went out a week ago, has brought his Countach in, Harry Metcalf from Harry's Garage. And he has got a huge YouTube channel, over 500,000 subscribers. And in fact, it was him who persuaded me to start this one. So thank you again, Harry. And it all started with his Espada engine rebuild, which we completed a while back. So he's brought his Countach in, and we've got a rather interesting gearbox noise. Harry and I had some amusing moments driving this car and listening to the gearbox, or rather trying not to listen to the gearbox in my case. But we've got no choice but to take the whole engine and gearbox out as one package. So that's what we're starting to do now. Well, here we are under the business end of this car, and as we went through with Harry the other day, we've drained the gearbox oil off, and it wasn't altogether wonderful news, but the way that Lamborghini have designed this powertrain is quite interesting. It's a huge length, over 2 meters, maybe 2.5 meters long, this entire drivetrain. And the big challenge for manufacturers such as Ferrari and Lamborghini with mid-engine V12s was actually where to put everything, how to package it. So the Countach, to a certain extent, suffers with the same problem as its contemporary, the Ferrari Berlinetta Boxer and the following Testarossa did. They had a flat 12, but it was mounted over the gearbox, so you had quite a high centre of gravity, a lot of weight, higher than they would have liked it to be. Porsche 911 engine, of course, is right down near the ground because it's got a remote oil tank, so it doesn't need to store the oil in the sump, and the gearbox is in front of it. But by the time you get to a V12, Lamborghini had no choice but to come up with something innovative. The Miura before it has the gearbox behind the engine, that works. But with something like this, because of the way it was conceived, they had no choice but to do it this way, really, just for lengthwise weight distribution as well. So we've got a relatively conventional gearbox here, 5-speed manual gearbox. The clutch is here. It comes out of the engine forwards into the gearbox and then runs right through a shaft in the engine sump right to here to the differential, which then takes the power out to the back wheels. So it's almost an up and over type situation. Power comes from the engine up here, through the gearbox, out down the bottom, and then to the crown wheel and pinion, the differential at the back. And this is a huge powertrain, and that's why it's quite a job to get them out. So we're going to be doing that. It's quite grubby under here. We're not going to make any attempt to clean it until we've got it out, because that helps us trace any leaks. I suspect there are some leaks higher up on the top of the engine, maybe cam cover related, which are leaking oil down. So yeah, going to be an interesting job. Leon's just carrying on disconnecting the drive shafts. Now he's got the exhaust off, and we'll carry on getting it ready to come out for Harry's next visit. Harry's car, this is, I've got 2 Countach exhaust systems here essentially. This is a standard Countach back box here, which is generally fitted to most of them in varying greater or lesser degrees. And this thing weighs an absolute ton. If it was Mercedes-Benz or Rolls-Royce, they'd actually put different rear springs on to cope with the weight difference. It's that heavy. But that's one we just happen to have it in stock here. But this is the exhaust off Harry's, and this is what was called a sports exhaust, which there were very few factory options on Countach, but this was one of them. And it essentially consists of, here's the pipes from the manifolds, and it's got these this rather whizzy little assembly with essentially 4 cherry bombs on it. These are cherry bombs which are beloved in the US for, if you want to make your V8 engine make a wonderful noise, you take your stock exhaust system with 15 mufflers per side off, and you put a couple of these in there, and hey presto, you got a really lovely fruity V8 sound. And if it's good enough for a V8, surely it's good enough for a V12, some might argue. So that's what this is. This was on Harry's car. I haven't looked at the original spec sheet, but it probably has been on it from new. And interesting to see how Lamborghini got round the sound test at the time, because it's quite noisy, but it sounds glorious when you open the engine up. And Harry's next video will be us taking the engine out of this car, which is no small undertaking on a Countach, when the power unit is about 50% of the length of the car. And we're going to see how this progresses. We'll also move on to another Countach, which has just arrived, literally today. Well, Countach number 2 we've got in the workshop is this car here. It's a US specification car, so it's got fuel injection, which American cars had to have for emissions reasons, because the fuel metering on injection systems in the 80s was more managed and more efficient than carburetors, although they are slightly less powerful than their rest of world counterparts. They generate slightly less power because obviously 12 carburetor individual throttle body setup is going to be very gas flow efficient. Forgive the noise, by the way, it's blowing an absolute storm here. It's like Ice Station Zebra. So this is a very nice car, actually. We're just going to start work on it. We're going to recommission it because it's come on the boat from the US. So we're going to get to work on that, see what we find, and hopefully get a tune out of it after not too long, because the basics are all there. We've checked everything, it's all okay. We're just not sure that everything's getting the right thing in the right place at the right time. The interesting thing about the US cars, I mean, there were various strata of imported Countaches, from barely through the regulations to completely not through the regulations but fudged. A lot of grey imports. If you've ever seen the movie Rain Man, Tom Cruise was supposedly an importer of grey market cars. You could see the Countach being unloaded off the ship right at the opening sequence, but they normally had like the Cannonball Run Countach, a great big front spoiler here, which this one mercifully has not got. It is the standard Countach front end, but the back's got a sort of fiberglass moulded addendum on the back instead of the flat panel with the rear lights. So at some stage we're going to take that off and convert it into a Euro spec car with the passage of time. People aren't quite as precious about these things now as they were at the time. But fortunately, again, no massive impact bumpers. But the main difference, as I say, is the fuel injection system on the engine. And we'll see if we can get that up and running again. Well, we've tried to start this car. It should, as I say, if everything's set up properly, with this type of fuel injection system and the auxiliary air valves, which let more air into the engine when it's cold, it should actually kick into life fairly quickly. So we're going to give it a little gentle persuasion. We're going to undo one of the induction pipes and spray some cold start into it to see if we can get it to run. Drastic measures, but it hasn't been started for some weeks. So that's what we're going to do. Start with the simple things first. Yeah, the pumps are kicking in by the sounds of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Doesn't sound like it, does it?
Okay, try that in.
Have we got a spark there?
Yeah.
You're checking for fuel, are you?
Yeah.
Marvellous. Almost looks like we know what we're doing.
Oh yes. You want to cycle with ignition?
You ready?
Yeah. Okay, just spin it over here. No fuel pressure.
Oh.
Go to the fuel distributor.
Let me just see if there's an immobiliser in here, which they have. That would be a great big fat no. Don't like the look of this connector. Impressive. You will need this.
It's a good sign.
This is called the gradual reveal. Right, you've got that 6 connector block there,
Yeah.
and these lovely wires with charmingly. There's 5 wires going there, I think, and one of them wasn't connected. I mean, it's pretty horrible, that really.
Yeah, it's got a load of aftermarket connectors on there, isn't it?
Yeah. Would you mind working your magic on that and seeing if you can?
I'll do my best.
It's horrible, that, isn't it? I think that's to do with the fuel pump, because it's in the right area.
There's a little box, little electronic box up there as well.
It's been converted to the MSD ignition, as they usually have.
Yeah. Tap adapter MSD.
Yes.
On that box.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, leave it with me. I shall see what I can
Battery's disconnected.
do. Yeah. Okay.
That wiring loom is definitely going into the ignition.
Yeah.
We have got a spark.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be fuel pump cut off, I understand that. But we smelt the exhaust and there was no smell of anything from the exhaust. Well, we're just, Peter's attacking the electrics on this because we just cannot get any sort of life out of the fuel pumps. But fortunately, while it was in the States, they invented the quick release Countach grill. There should be screws in this to hold it in place, but obviously they're not. So we've got the wiring here, which Pete has been having a look at on this side. Unusually, because it's got a different fuel injection setup for the States, and Pete's been grappling with the wiring. So, Mr. Grappler, here you are.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a bit problematic, this, isn't it? It's been some years since it's run.
Yeah, it does show. It's got the age-old problems of stale fuel, water in the fuel as well, which happens if it's left to stand. But also, because where these grills are, they get water down into here, so you get water damage in the printed circuit board and these relays. There's 2 fuel pump relays and a timer relay that controls the fuel pump relays. So none of them were working, so it's just been a case of trying to chase the circuit through and find out where the feeds are missing, or the earths are missing.
And it's also not easy to get wiring diagrams for these because everything's bespoke for the American market with the fuel injection. And this is all over on the left-hand side on Euro spec cars.
It is. It's a different system. It's a different system on the European stuff.
So,
and of course, then we found that the fuel pumps were faulty as well. Again, probably because it's been stood and had water in the fuel, so the pumps are seized up. Right. So,
well, we can send it up and have a look at that in a minute.
Yeah.
But right, thank you very much indeed for the update.
Okie doke.
Ready by lunchtime, is it?
Oh, probably. Not sure which lunchtime, but yeah.
Great. Well, this is a Bosch roller cell fuel pump. So you've got plastic rollers driven by a motor immersed in petrol, actually, immersed in fuel. And this is a generic high pressure. It works at about 2 bar, 30 pounds per square inch for this injection system. And this delivers up to 150 litres of fuel an hour. They have different gradients of fuel delivery. But these were used on lots of cars in the 70s and 80s and 90s. They were a generic pump. And for however many they made of these for the US, it's very few. They're not going to have a special fuel pump given to them by Bosch. They're going to use a generic one. So that's what we've got. And this car is unfortunately a long way from being started. It's going to be next time or the time after. But Pete's on with tracing the unending wiring associated with it. We'll get a couple of new fuel pumps. We'll fit them, we'll drain the tanks and clean them out, a couple of filters. We'll see if we can get the tune out of it. Well, that concludes another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop video. Sorry there was no road test in this one. Weather, time, all sorts of things. We're trying to do this in the middle of a busy workshop. But we'll be back with something else very soon, and thanks for watching.